U.S. military revamp strategy to counter China and Russia. After nearly 2 decades of accumulating dust on the streets of Fallujah and Camp Bastion, the U.S. Marines are once again preparing to get their boots wet. Following the publication of the Trump administration's 2020 National Defense Strategy, the U.S. military has been revamping its strategies to counter Russia and China, in an era of what analysts call renewed, great power competition. In the Pacific, China's layers of long-range precision missiles designed to hold the U.S. Navy and its jets at arm's length have left strategists with a headache. The concerns aren't simply about all-out warfare, but that this so-called anti-access bubble hampers the support of regional allies, and potentially threatens to push the United States out of now vulnerable permanent positions such as deep water ports. The Marines have now come up with a plan to turn the tables on the Chinese military. They're going to need a smaller boat. Marine Corps Commandant General David Berger published a major shift in strategy in July, which would see the Marines return to their roots as an expeditionary force that supports the Navy, with an almost exclusive focus on countering China in the Pacific. The current force is not organized, trained, or equipped to support the naval force, operating in contested maritime spaces, facilitating sea control, or executing distributed maritime operations, Berger wrote. There is no piece of equipment or major defense acquisition program that defines us. Berger's plan has yet to run the gauntlet of Congress, and needs the green light from the Navy in the form of a sweeping Navy Force Structure Assessment (FSA), expected sometime in the next month. The biggest thing that came out of the new strategy is the shift of the Marine Corps away from focusing on amphibious assaults, where they will storm a beach like in World War II, toward much smaller operations, said Brian Clark, senior fellow at the Center for Strategic and Budgetary Assessments. Clark, a former special assistant to the Chief of Naval Operations, told the Epoch Times that those new operations would be more like small raids, setting up advanced bases in remote locations. Using higher numbers of smaller ships, the Marines would set up artillery, batteries, and surveillance on numerous remote atolls and island chains, slipping inside the anti-aircraft bubble on smaller ships, without the provocation or risk associated with a carrier or large amphibious ship. That shift in strategy has a lot of implications for the kinds of equipment and systems the Marines need, which has created a lot of disruption in the industry that supports the Marine Corps and also with the Navy that builds the ships and mounts the ships the Marines use, Clark said. In many ways, that marks a return to the traditional role of the Marines as an amphibious navy supporting expeditionary force, albeit minus the large-scale beach assaults launched from massive amphibious ships. Distributed lethality. The Marine Corps strategy aligns with new Navy tactics called distributed operations, designed to counter the fact that the queens in the game of maritime chess, the large U.S. ships and carriers, are held at bay by relatively expendable firepower. Distributed operations mean moving away from reliance on a few large ships, instead, distributing the firepower and forces, lethality, as well as surveillance, across many more platforms, including unmanned ships, with no single point of failure. Visions of a massed naval armada 9 nautical miles offshore in the South China Sea preparing to launch the landing force in swarms of ACVs, LCUs, and LCACs, amphibious landing vehicles, are impractical and unreasonable, Berger wrote in his strategy document. We must accept the realities created by the proliferation of precision long-range fires, mines, and other smart weapons, and seek innovative ways to overcome those threat capabilities. Among the other solutions, Berger also proposed experimenting with lethal long-range unmanned systems capable of traveling 200 nautical miles. But the mainstay of marine distributed operations would be Expeditionary Advanced Base Operations (EABO), the creation of positions on numerous atolls and islands, potentially owned by allies, which Clark referred to. Similar strategies have been proposed for British Marines as a solution to the long-range missile puzzles. Shell game. Siddharth Kaushal, a research fellow on sea power at defense think tank Royal United Services Institute, last week co-authored a paper on the subject. It's very difficult to find and suppress missile batteries on an island, Kaushal told the Epoch Times. EABO envisions creating a litany of advanced anti-ship positions, anti-air defense positions, and potentially forward air refueling positions. This would now give the adversary a headache because they now have to waste expensive precision-guided munitions on multiple atolls, many of which are empty, most of which will be hardened to a certain degree, he said. This would give the U.S. Navy, which would be operating behind these sorts of atoll positions, more freedom for maneuvers as well as a certain degree of air cover. That protection of the naval force marks another key change in Marine Corps strategy, he said, a focus on assisting the fleet. The Marine Corps could also bring anti-ship missiles to those positions, something it hasn't done in the past. For the Chinese, it's worthwhile to throw precision-guided missiles worth millions at a $14 billion ship that can be sunk with one hit, taking down billions of dollars worth of aircraft at one time. But even if it can be identified, an island or atoll can't be sunk, stacking the costs in favor of the Marines. Furthermore, the Marines would be constantly moving positions from one island to another. It's like a shell game, in a way, Kaushal said. One shell is full, many are empty. If you're constantly moving, you force the opponent to expend munitions. But the island position strategy isn't primarily about all-out warfare. Instead, it turns the tables on adversaries that have relied on their anti-ship and anti-aircraft missile prowess to hassle their way toward their geopolitical goals without sparking all-out conflict. This approach of putting U.S. weapons on Allied soil, it's using the Chinese playbook against them, Clark notes. Because you end up with a similar set of considerations. So having smaller ships, preferably with stealth capability, is vital not only militarily, it's also about being able to slip into position either unnoticed or with a politically palatable cover story.